The wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood, but the sound didn't wake Elias. He stayed exactly where he was, his rhythmic, steady breathing a mocking contrast to the frantic pounding of my heart. We had been married for 6 years, and in all that time, I thought I knew every version of him. I knew how he took his coffee, I knew the specific way his left eyebrow twitched when he was lying about being tired, and I knew the exact weight of his hand against the small of my back. But tonight, as I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the phone he'd left face up on the nightstand, I realized I didn't know him at all. It wasn't a text message that broke me. It was a photo. Just a picture of a house, a small, nondescript cottage at the edge of town, tucked behind a thicket of overgrown oak trees. There was no one in the photo, just the front door, painted a shade of blue I'd never seen before. But it was the timestamp that made the air vanish from the room. 2 p.m. today. At 2 p.m., Elias was supposed to be in a board meeting 3 towns over. He had called me from the lobby, his voice smooth and professional, telling me he'd be home late for dinner. I had spent the afternoon prepping his favorite meal, worrying that he was overworking himself, feeling that familiar, warm ache of gratitude for a husband who worked so hard for our future. I didn't wake him. I couldn't. Instead, I left the room, my movements heavy and disjointed, as if my limbs belonged to someone else. I walked into the kitchen, the shards of the wine glass still glinting under the soft glow of the stove light, and I just stood there. The silence of the house, which usually felt like a sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage. I started to think back. The last 3 months had been a blur of little things, the way he'd started keeping his phone on silent, the sudden, inexplicable habit of taking calls on the back porch, the faint, lingering scent of jasmine that would cling to his blazer when he came home. I'd told myself he was stressed. I'd told myself I was becoming paranoid, that the monotony of our routine was finally getting to me. But looking at that blue door, I knew. I didn't know who she was, or how long it had been, or if he even loved her. But I knew that everything we had built, the house, the promises, the years of quiet intimacy, was a structure built on sand. The next morning, I watched him put on his tie. He was humming a low, melodic tune, something I hadn't heard in years. He kissed my forehead, his lips lingering just a second too long, a performance of affection that suddenly tasted like copper in my mouth. "Big day today, Sarah," he said, smiling that familiar smile. "I should be home by 6. Don't wait up if you're tired, but I'd love to grab a drink on the deck." "Have a good day," I whispered. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just dressed in dark clothes, took my keys, and started the drive. I knew the road. I had lived in this town my entire life, but I'd never turned down that specific dirt lane. As I drove, the houses thinned out, replaced by tall, shivering pines that blocked out the morning sun. Then, I saw it. The blue door. It wasn't a cottage, not really. It was a guest house, hidden behind an older, larger estate. I parked a quarter-mile down and walked the rest of the way, my boots crunching on the gravel, the sound amplified by the absolute stillness of the woods. I reached the blue door and stood there, my hand hovering over the wood. I expected to feel rage. I expected to feel the burning need to kick it open and confront him, to see the look of terror on his face. But as I reached for the handle, it wasn't locked. I pushed it open. The room inside was small, but it was beautiful. It smelled of jasmine, that same scent I traced on his clothes for weeks. There were paintings on the wall, beautiful, intricate landscapes, and a small desk covered in sketches. It looked like a studio. A workspace. I walked further in, my breath hitched in my throat. On the desk, there was a stack of letters. They were open, the envelopes discarded on the floor. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But I picked one up, my fingers trembling. It wasn't from a woman. It wasn't a love letter to a mistress. "Dear Elias," it read, in a handwriting that was jagged and strained. *, "The debt is due. You have until the end of the week, or the truth about your father's accident goes to the precinct. We know you're trying to build a new life, but you don't get to run away from the blood on your hands, asterisk. My vision blurred. I sat down heavily on the floor, the paper fluttering from my hand. Elias wasn't cheating on me. He was being blackmailed. All those late nights, all those hushed phone calls, the stress, the distance, it wasn't a romance. It was a man terrified of losing the only thing he cared about, the life we built together. I felt a sudden, crushing wave of relief, followed immediately by a cold, sharp dread. I had suspected him of the worst kind of betrayal, and in doing so, I had nearly turned my back on him when he needed me most. I reached for my phone to call him, to tell him I knew, to tell him we'd figure it out, that we were in this together. Then, I noticed something else. Tucked under the desk was a leather-bound journal. I pulled it out, curious, thinking it might explain the accident mentioned in the letter. I opened it to the last entry, dated yesterday. Asterisk Sarah is getting suspicious. I can see it in her eyes. She's too observant for her own good. If she finds the cabin, if she finds the letters, I'll have to make sure she never makes it home. I love her, I really do, but I love my freedom more. Everything I've done, the money I've hidden, the lies I've told, it was all for the life I wanted. If she becomes a liability, she'll just be another secret I have to bury, asterisk. I froze. The room went deathly cold. The sound of a car crunching on gravel drifted through the open door. I looked up. A black sedan was pulling into the driveway. I didn't move. I couldn't. I listened as the car engine cut off, and then, the distinct sound of a door opening and closing. Elias wasn't at a board meeting. He was here. He had seen my car parked down the road. I looked at the blue door, then back at the journal, then at the man walking up the path toward me. His face wasn't the face of the husband who kissed my forehead that morning. His expression was blank, devoid of that soft, familiar warmth. His eyes were hard, calculated, and focused entirely on the house. He wasn't coming home to talk. He was coming home to finish the cleanup. As his shadow fell across the threshold, he stopped. He saw me sitting there on the floor, the journal open in my lap. For a long, terrifying moment, neither of us breathed. The wind whistled through the trees, a lonely, mournful sound that felt like an ending. Elias didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, like a man who had dropped a fragile piece of glass and was simply calculating the cost of the mess. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah," he said, his voice terrifyingly steady, echoing in the small, quiet room. "I told you I was working." He took a step inside, the floorboards creaking under his weight. He closed the blue door behind him, and the click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I looked at him, and for the first time in 6 years, I truly saw him. I saw the stranger I had married, the man who had woven a web of lies so tight that I was already caught in the center of it. "I came here because I loved you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled then, a thin, sad thing that didn't reach his eyes. "I know. That's the most tragic part, isn't it?" He reached into his jacket pocket, and the last thing I saw before the world went dark wasn't the husband I knew, but the shadow of the man who had been hiding in plain sight all along. I realized then that the greatest betrayal wasn't the lie he told me about where he'd been, it was the lie he told me every single day, by letting me believe that he was a man capable of being loved at all.